Also, following up. Yeah. Once you're done with the interview, um, it's you want to try and stay in contact because you might need clarification on certain things, even with your recordings, even with notes you may have taken, and research that you've done. It might be something you weren't quite sure about. They said something you didn't fully understand. It might be a little bit of information here or there, a little tiny bit here, little details that you just want to make sure you get it right. And after you're done with your interview, say thank be very very gracious and say thank you for coming. Let them know I may call you to just to double check on a couple things that I may find, or maybe there was something I might have missed that I need cleared up a little bit with. And usually they're very very open after all that time interviewing with you. A quick reference here or there, and you might be able to email that. In that case, it might be just a quick phone call. Um, they're usually very very receptive to certain things like that. Yeah, some people are a little uptight. Oh, my life is so. Just work around it. Usually, it's not. They're not major aspects, but I mean, you never know. They might have said something, and then somebody else from that story might have said something that contradicted them, and you have to kind of like talk to them. And it all depends on the situation, but it's making sure. Sometimes you have to follow up. New details pop up, new aspects, um, and then sometimes before you send those emails or make those phone calls, um, think them through. Figure out how you're going to ask that. Form it in a way that'll get the best possible reaction. Because you want to get the most you can out of that out of that request for information to follow up with them. All right. Some things to do when you're forming some of those questions. Talk to people. Talk to fellow reporters, or maybe your editor, or producers, or assignment desk, or whoever or whatever the sources are that you work alongside with that are also in this. And yeah, we're all busy. I get that, especially, but we there is a mutual respect amongst each other, especially when you first start. You're going to be asking a lot of questions. Yeah, you're going to learn a good amount in school, but you're going to really learn even so much more in the field. And a lot of that is through the mentors that you'll have when you get in the field. They're the people people taught them, and they're passing on what they learned to you. And that's the way this industry works a lot. So part of that is sometimes you look at some of your questions, go back, look at some of those questions before you go to these interviews, and have other people look at it that are reporters or people who do what you're doing. Say, hey, does this work? Does this flow? How are you using this? It's important to make sure you're right with your questions, and you want to try to avoid. You don't want to do loaded questions. It's like what they mean by loaded questions is that old question type. It's like, oh, when did you stop beating your wife, Senator? And that's obviously it's an extreme thing, and answering that could not help that person in either way, shape, or form. Yes, this is an extreme example, but that's your idea of a loaded question. So, because you can't win on either way answering that. And it's a very negative tone, obviously, with that specific question. But that's kind of the idea for loaded questions. So yeah, making sure someone else sees eyes on what you're doing, and that's all part of it. Anything that you create, especially when you're writing something or creating something like that, you want someone to take a look at your work. Say, hey, especially people who do the job and are doing a lot of the same things you're doing. Hey, does this work? And yeah, it's a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, all right, let's take a look at that, and they'll say either yay, nay, or maybe tweak this a little bit. But there's no shame in doing that. I can't. If I ask people questions, they're gonna look down upon me. Especially if you don't ask questions especially when you first start. Now that's what's going to start people looking down on you. They expect you to not know what you're doing when you first get here. You're good enough. You have certain skills that you're good enough to work there, but at the same time, they know, and they know they're gonna because they were in the same boat you were in. So yeah, don't be too scared. Don't be scared to ask about certain questions before you ask them. And then the idea of on and off the record. Okay, we hear about this is on the record, this is off the record. You may have seen that a million times in TV shows and movies and stuff like that, but it is an actual thing. Basically, lots of times you'll have sources, and this I find, yeah, mostly, more probably more in corporate and political venues that, well, off the record, this is what I think about it. Because sometimes they don't want to put their name to giving away certain pieces of information, but yet they want the certain piece of information out there. Um, so you got to think about that. It all depends on what the information is, how important that information is to the people that you serve, to your audience. Um, what's the story about? How massive is that piece of information within the context of your story? And what would be the repercussions if you did keep them off the record? Does it still work with that? Um, or is it sometimes just people playing politics, especially in a governmental standpoint? It's like, oh, I don't want to get attributed to this because I don't want to get in trouble with, whoever, and they're just playing some sort of stupid political game, and they might be using you. They do that all the time, and lots of people fall for it all the time, especially with the web, and especially with the lack of journalism we seem to have nowadays, and corporate interests, and so many other biases and other things that mess up the storytelling process and the process of journalism, and plus, lack of staff and less people to do more work. It, it's all there are many, 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 many different factors for that. But yeah, but the thing is when if someone says I wanted this off the record, you have to say either yes or no, and you have a lot of times have to figure it out on the fly in while you're there. Um, so yeah, but like I said, don't do it lightly. It's like, no, it's off the record. Oh yeah, yeah, sure, I'll do it. It's like, yeah, it depends. You find a lot about that with life. It depends. Depends on the situation. Depends on the story. How germane that information is to the story. Um, and like I said, are you being used? And I couldn't possibly list every single situation of what could possibly happen. You have to be right there at that time. You have to. That's part of being a journalist. It's like, oh wow, this is a lot harder than we thought. Yeah, it is a lot harder than you thought because there's a lot going on, and you got to worry about a lot of different things when you're going out there and getting these stories. So yeah, it's follow those, these lines, and sometimes you might, um, and you have to like answer them either way, and to either off or on the record. You might have to come down to talking to a higher up in your at your job about this, and then if you might have agreed to one thing, and then they say yeah, I can off the record, but your person who's above you says it's got to be on the record. You have to make sure you talk um, to that source, and then you might not be able to publish it, or there's a whole other set of circumstances that you might have to deal with. It's not as easy as people think. It's there's a lot of headaches involved, but that's the point. We're here to inform, and it's not necessarily an easy process. Um, that's why we're so important. We It has to stop being just fluff, 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 and oh, just do what people want to hear or what makes them fuzzy, and keep going with a certain narrative. That doesn't do any good. We're here to do a job. We're supposed to do it correctly. So, and this is important if people are on or off the record. So, so just play it by ear. See what that's all I can say. It depends on the situation. Some other types of interviews that you have to do. Breaking news. You know how much breaking news I've done in my time? It's insane how much. Something, there's a fire here. Oh, shots fired someplace. Oh, there was a crash, or any number of things can happen, and you got to get there. And like I always say, it's not where you are; it's where you got to be next. And you might be on that place to where you got to be next, and that where you got to be next changes while you're driving towards there, and you have to turn completely around and go 40 miles the other way to get to the other store that you need to get to. And dealing with breaking news is you have to go into the situation. When you go into a situation, it's always different. I'll give you a fire from my experience with fires, because you're going to be doing fires. It's just fires always happen. They will happen. That's just part of it. You will be gone. If you're in this industry, you will be covering fires. Okay? And when you're covering those fires for breaking news, it happens out of nowhere. They have fire police, and when those fire police are there, usually there. This is my experience. You listen to those fire police, because they're the ones who I worked in television, so I had the big blue Xterra. We had Xterras, Nissan Xterras with the logos Fox 43 on there, and they knew who we were, and I had press passes, and so they would say, okay, you can go on through, because usually there's a block, it's blocked off, and they'll let you through, and then you go in slowly, and there might be someone else there, and then you just. The thing is, you have to stay out of the way. All right, there's going to be an area where they will allow you to be. All right, sometimes you have more freedom to where you have to cover and see what you have to cover. And then remember, I'm also shooting video, so I'm still trying to get shots of what I need to get for a fire standpoint. And then you always have the area. But once if you're shooting, once you're done in that limited area that you're allowed to shoot in, but remember, because you have a zoom, you're not going to be able to get in right in, and you should not be in there. You should never be in the way of the first responders, the people who are taking care of the situation. But then there's always a part where the media is always just hanging out. And sometimes you have to wait for that, and a lot of times it's in the fire. It's waiting for the fire chief or a person who might be the person who's a spokesperson for the fire department. Normally, it's the fire chief. Just to let you know, firefighter sound isn't the best. Interviews, they always have their same. We have structure fire, a 5-story thing. We brought in these, there's 5 departments that came in, and it's always basically the same thing with that, but you're getting all that, but you need that information. And then you're not going to have any homework on there. They're not going to expect you to know things because it just happened. So they'll give you a certain bit of information of a lot of the basics, and then they'll say, if you have any questions, okay, I'm happy to answer any questions you have now. And that's where it's kind of like, oh, where did the fire start? They might not have it. They might not mention it. You'd be surprised. Now, we're still looking at our investigation, but it looks as of right now, and this might be one of those times to say it's off the record or this appears to be electrical, but they might not know that because they might need the investigators to do the fire investigator to do the investigator to find the source. Sometimes they do know at the time. And then they might relay information from people or witnesses that might have said something, or what firefighters found, or so they're not expecting, so there's not going to be a whole lot of homework there because you don't know. So what might be quote unquote stupid questions in other interviews aren't for this because it's breaking news. You don't know anything. They don't expect you to know anything. So they're expecting those kinds of questions. And especially if you better get this in this moment. And usually This breaking news thing, and it's technically a kind of press conference. We'll talk about press conference, even though it's very, it's outside and it's a group of the different reporters and cameras right by each other, and sometimes you have reporters, sometimes you don't, and you have to mic them up and get the shot, and you're all jam packed, basically, because you're all kind of close by. So don't. I know we're living in a social distancing time, but once we get back to normal, we're very close to each other. And it depends on, just to let you know, sometimes it depends on the market, how people work with you at rival media outlets. And it was up in central Pennsylvania. And especially on the weekend stuff, we were all basically in the same boat. We pretty much helped each other out for the most part. Occasionally, had people who were a little snotty, but it's the market. So, and you gotta take a feel about whatever the market is, however they work with each other, and it all depends. Sometimes they're friendly, sometimes they're not so friendly. But yeah, so and you're focusing when you're on these breaking news. You're focusing on the five W's and the one H, the who, what, where, when, how. Maybe they have a why, because you don't know anything. Yeah, it's breaking news. It's so see what they get, see what they give you, and then ask whatever questions you think you need to build that basic story. And then we go into the news conferences. And like I said, this in this instance for the breaking news, they're mini press conferences. They're just not scheduled. A lot of them are scheduled, and it's done for a reason, because they can feel they can control the environment. It lets lots of different media outlets come to one place as opposed to constantly taking calls. Oh, can we set up an appointment? Can we set up an appointment with you? What they can do is they set up the press conference. So it was like, okay, we're going to have a press conference about this. And it allows them to put out the information they want to put out. And in a way, so you're all basically getting the same amount of information, same different sources. Um, and there is an agenda. When I mean agenda, I mean like meetings and agenda meeting, and they have specifically, okay, this person starts, and then this person, this person, this person. Maybe sometimes, occasionally, someone goes out of order when they're doing these things. I've done it from a news standpoint. I worked for the city of Harrisburg, and they had press conferences, news conferences all the time about a variety of different things. Some fluffy, some important, but they were always well planned out beforehand. Um, and it's it does set a tone depending a lot depends on the story itself. It could be vary in very different ways. You got to be able to work with that and work around that when you're there. So they're able to control it up to a certain point, but doing a news conference is important, because yeah, you're gonna have certain information they're gonna put out there that's gonna give you a lot of information that you need for your story, but then you're gonna listen. You're gonna listen to sit back, all right. Sit back when it comes time to the press for other questions. Listen to what the other people are talking about. You want to there might be a certain angle to a story, but you want to see what else other people are doing, and if and they could do some work for you in a way. But sit back, see what people are saying, see the reactions that they're getting from these people in charge. Once again, it goes to picking up, even though it's not a sit down one-on-one interview. There's tones, there's nonverbal communication. You can pick up on how people are reacting. You can see how other people alongside who work with these people who are at the podium, you can pick up on how they react to it. That's all part of it. And so so you'll see what they do, and what you're going to do is you're going to be thinking all as well. You're going to be critically thinking. It's like, oh, it's like, could I follow up on that question, or is there something? You have to always be thinking when you're doing this. Your brain always has to get going. You can't just get caught up in the in the television of, oh, I got what I need for the story of the who, what, where, when, how. It's bigger than being a real journalist. Is always thinking and trying to come up with the new thoughts and new angles, and is there something more there? And then eventually, you might have a question of your own there, but there's also a lot of times now. This doesn't happen all the time. Um, After a news conference, it might sometimes they'll have a news conference um, on one story that you still have to cover, but you might have another story that you've been working on as well. And sometimes you say the mayor is talking. There was a story about I don't know a totally other topic and say, "Oh, is it okay if I talk to you about this other topic afterwards?" And usually that's where a lot of times they'll get a couple quick questions. It won't be very long because they don't have that much time to deal with. But lots of times they will, depending on their schedule, allow other questions about other things after that for the opportunity to talk with them. So that don't just leave there. If you have other things to talk to them about, see if you can talk to them about real quick about um, some of the reactions to some other story that you're working on. That because these people are working on a lot to deal with a lot of different subjects. All right, so that's another thing to think about with conferences, news conferences. So they're able to control a lot of stuff, but up to a point. Plus, it's convenient from all those people coming in. But it's not necessarily easy. It's having got to keep your head on straight and think critically. Lots going on. All right, it's all part of it. It's a lot is going on. These are all things you have to think about when you're being a journalist. It's what makes it even harder. Some other types of interviews. Person on the street. I've done so many of these. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're terrible and they never see the light of day. Because some people are good at speaking, and some people, and I'm not just talking about age-wise, just in general. That's why I said it's important to be able to form the questions in a way that won't allow them to say yes or no questions. And they're also they depending on the story, it's the person on the street interview is it gives perspective to possibly reactions to bigger stories. Could be it's a lot of localization. It could be how many stories we do on what does Main Street feel about what's going on in Washington? How does that affect their bottom line or their pocketbook or their wallet or their whatever and or how do they feel about this? And it could be any number of topics. And this is actually is an important aspect of getting reaction from everyday people. And depending on the story, it's appropriate. Um, if it's a real serious, bigger, over the top, important story, then maybe not so much. That's why you would get maybe like talking about astronomy. No one's gonna really know or care. They're not gonna give you good sound about that. That's why you get the astronomy professor from the school to talk about that, who's gonna know about it. But I mean, there's other things that and you get a lot of person on the street things. How many times they go to parades or stuff like that, or events or fairs, and you're gonna be doing a lot of that stuff too. They're fun, charity walks and charity motorcycle rides and 5Ks. Done a lot of 5Ks, and yeah, part of those I would always get an interview with an organizer from it. Maybe the mayor was there for it, or some other political person. But then you try to get maybe a couple of people who were who were there, and lots of times you might be surprised who you get, especially for some of those charity things, and you might have someone who's like a person who's been battling, say, cancer or doing things for cancer, and they're being part of this, and they've got an entire team with them, and that's a whole other story. That could become an even bigger story. You find out that they've been battling cancer for so long, and they're finally ready to go out, and this is, and you find out even more and more and more because there's a story with everybody, so it could become a much bigger story than it was before. And you'll still cover that story that you had originally, but there might be a whole other slew of stories with this person. These are human interest stories. That's part of what we do. So it adds perspective to the whole news gathering process and news storytelling process. And then there'll be the times when you're going to have hostile interviews. People who don't really want to talk, but sometimes they're in positions where you have to it's going to be tough to ask the questions, and it's your job. Maybe somebody did something wrong or said something wrong, or um, you have to be professional about it. You can't be confrontational about it. You have to be professional in the way you ask the question. You have to, you have to be. It's like, oh, well, this is what was said. What is your reaction? Or this is alleged that you are accused of, or this. What is your reaction to this kind of thing? You have to be, like it says, even handed. Okay, you have to be professional about it. You have to be polite, but you still have to do the job. You can't give up. Don't be over the top, rude. It's a lot of stuff you see is in movies. Okay. Oh, look at me! I'm gonna get you. No, that's not the way it is. If you're gonna be a good, you have to be professional about your job. Okay. Don't let the movies and TV shows taint the way you do your reporting. Okay. They're TV shows. They're movies. They're there to get the most drama out of stuff. But sometimes you're going to have people who don't necessarily want to ask or answer your questions. And when you have to ask those tough questions, you have to be polite about it, and still show impartiality, but still do your job. It's not easy. It's tough, but it's something that has to be done, because you're trying to get a story, and sometimes stories aren't easy. Okay, good journalism isn't. All right. Sometimes you're doing profiles. Profiles are many different angles of a given person. So yeah, you'll talk to that person. It might be a couple times, and then also you'll talk to other people, because they might bring up, in your questioning. You should try to find out more in-depth stuff about who helped them along the way to get where they're going, and who's helped respond, and then talk to them, those mentors or people, or whoever these other people who really know them well. But you're doing a profile piece, and you have to get into the real, in-depth people. Now, these are the people who know them best. Um, so you're gonna have you need lots of time to, if you're doing a profile. Profiles are in-depth stories on these people, and you're gonna have to spend some real time with them beforehand. Well, while with them, with other people that know them. Plus, you have to do a lot of homework beforehand. And some people say, "Oh, I heard everything." No, you haven't heard everything about them. You have to just dive right in and completely envelop yourself in that person, their life, and who they are, and everything about them, because it's a profile on them. And so if you're going to do that, it's going to take a while. This isn't one of those one and done, done with the story. Profiles. If you're doing profiles, you've come along pretty well, where you work and they've trusted you, to do such a thing. They don't just give that to anybody off the street. All right, you had to have been there and proven yourself to get these. So you have to take time to prepare and do as much research, and also pace the interview. See how it goes. Because if they're sitting doing a profile, you want some real in depth stories with them. And once again, you have to establish that connection with them and being there with them, and personally, and sitting down. That's why a lot of times we will go to places where they feel comfortable, be either work or home, or or some other place, or some other place that we have to make them feel comfortable. That's why we go into these places, and they don't usually normally come to the media outlet. We usually go to them, and it could be meeting at a restaurant or a park, or their house, or whatever, when they're doing this, because they want to be as comfortable as possible, and they're agreeing to you let them into their life. And so yeah, they're gonna try. You're gonna try to make them as comfortable as possible, and finding the right pace for that interview. And that, like I said, goes back to everything I already told you. It's just more in depth stuff, and following up with other people. So secondary sources, because then you need at least like two or three other people that might help in forming this story. And also, it's good because when you get done talking to those other people about this person, um, you may want to go back to the original person and say, "Oh yeah, um, they confirmed this, but there's something they said was a little different than when you said, and they saw it a little differently. And then they might have accidentally said something wrong because they miss. Sometimes people misremember things. Sometimes it's just yes. Sometimes it's just an excuse because they don't want to get in trouble. But sometimes people misremember things. It's been a while, um, and they've been through a lot. So it's. But I mean, that's part of it. And then you go back and to confirm certain things. But yeah, profile pieces take a little while. There's a lot of in depth in there. You want to get it right. Right? So when you're doing those profile pieces, you've at least established some sort of trust. You're not going to get those right away. Just don't know that. Then confirming information. Sometimes what you're going to do is sometimes we're looking for information because information's what we're about. Sometimes we're also trying to get good quotes. I do it with certain stories, especially a lot of charity things. I always ask, "Oh, how does it feel?" To the people who are organizers of those things. So, how does it feel to see all their hard work? She put all this work into it, and it's a once a year thing. Seeing all these people come out in droves and see that your all your work has come out to this, and all these people are coming out for this, and I can guarantee you're always going to get at least a little bit of welling up in the eyes because that's what I'm looking for. Because in that case, it's a good thing. It's a good event. If people coming together, and this is what people are passionate about. Also, open-ended questions. These are questions that can't just give yes or no answers. You want more detail to your questions. Sometimes when people ask closed questions, sometimes that's all you need, especially if you're following up on confirming it. Is this spelling right? Is this the right title for this person? Or was I right about this date that you said this happened? And just say yes or no. And sometimes in the context of those cold store questions, you might have to ask a why or how come, and um, that can help give you even more information or even better quotes. Because remember, part of it is information, part of it is the quotes that help build the whole story, gives the reader perspective, and it paints a picture with just your words when you're talking about print. Of what's going on. And that's the whole point. We're telling the story. And that's the only way you get to tell a good, full, and complete story. By getting those questions from these people, by getting answers to these questions from these people, to give it the full picture. And then sometimes we try to get a reaction and be good. Like I would try to get or sometimes be careful with what you do. You might get a negative reaction. Be very, very wary about that because then you might not get, depending on what you ask. People can be touchy. It might be a touchy situation. Be careful. All right. Make sure, is it worth it? Is it the right time to ask that? I think, is there a better way to ask the question? And I know what I'm doing is asking you to think very, 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 very quickly on the feet while you're right there on the ground, but you have to think critically. This is all part of thinking critically, being quick on your feet, being able to understand what you're saying, and not putting your foot in your mouth and jeopardizing a story, or telling a bad story or getting something wrong. This journalism thing's a lot harder than most people think. There's a lot you have to worry about, and more, even more now with all the technical aspects of it too. In addition, there are all the important ethical and good journalistic practices that you're supposed to follow, and especially in this day and time when things seem to just kind of go to the wayside, which is sad, but it's part of it. It's up to us to still can try to be good journalists. All right. So if you haven't learned anything from there, some major points of today is be prepared. Go back to the proper pre-production planning prevents piss poor performance. And when all said and done, perseverance. Keep persevering. look, research, do your homework before you go out there. It's essential. If you don't, they'll know it. You will not be doing the job that you were hired to do. And you may not have that job if you're not constantly preparing. That's why I keep throwing it down your throat. I'm never gonna stop. I don't care. Is it a pain? Yeah, I don't care because I know what's out there. I know what you need to do. I know what you need to succeed to do it. Is it a pain? Yes. But if you're gonna do it right. Understand your purpose. Why am I there? Who is this person? What's the story? Understand why you're and focus on that. But remember, also keep your eyes open, your ears open. Think critically, and get that story. Maybe there's an even bigger story with it. And listen. Listening's everything. Most people don't listen. That's why I ask you to pay attention. Why do I ask these stupid bonus questions? Are you paying attention? Nobody pays attention. And it's more than ever they don't listen. They don't pay attention. They don't know what's going on. Why is this important? Oh, this is lame. This is stupid. No, I'm trying to hone your listening skills. There's a lot going on, and people are so distracted in 17 different ways. Now more than ever with all the technology and people just focusing on what they like, and that's it. And here, I'm on this website or that website, or I'm on this social media. This is all I care about. This Twitter or TikTok. And, oh, did you see this? And this is up for 15 seconds. And, oh, look over here. Look at this pretty light. Oh, look at the birdie. Over here, over there. No, it drives you nuts. But you still have to listen. You're a journalist. You can't tell a story without listening, and you have to have hyper listening abilities. Not only people listen or don't listen and are just oblivious, you can't be. Not as a journalist. I'm sad to say there's probably a lot out there who just get caught up in the job and I just want to survive, and a whole lot of good journalism isn't happening, and the people are not getting what they need. It's at least do my part to make sure you guys are focused on this. That's why I do this. I want you to do it right. All right?